In this video, I'm going to cover Kamal versus Blossom. And just to be upfront, I created Blossom, so there's going to be some biases here. That being said, I think it's going to be pretty helpful because I had to study Kamal as well as a bunch of other tools in the deployment space in building Blossom. And I learned a lot, so hopefully you find this helpful. So kamaldeploy.org is the homepage here, and it says deploy web apps anywhere. If you've used Capistrano before, Kamal is essentially the successor to Capistrano. It's just Capistrano with containers. That's what it really is. And both Kamal and Capistrano kind of work the same way. It SSHs into a bunch of machines and then executes commands in parallel on these machines to install your application onto those servers. For this, I created 2 servers ahead of time here to save time. I have a Kamal DB server that has Postgres, and then I have a Kamal web server here. And this IP address is kind of worth pointing out here. It ends in 219, and that's where we're going to be deploying basically our app to. So to configure Kamal and tell it where to deploy to, what you want to look at is the config deploy.yml file. Basically, a brand new Rails app has this now generated. And what I did was I went here and configured it so it could deploy to the server that I just showed you. And I'm just going to go through each of these kind of fields, I guess, a step at a time. So there's service demo. This is like the service name. You can name it whatever you want. I just decided to name it demo. Then here's the image name. This is like the Docker image. This is where you're going to be telling Kamal to push the Docker image to. I'm using my account here and the demo repo. Now there's servers web. This is important because it tells you which servers to deploy to. And this IP address right here, this is the same IP address as what's on Hertzner here. See? If you want to deploy more servers, you can just add it to this list right here. Then proxy is the next one. Proxy is pretty cool. Basically, Kamal has the ability to issue SSL certs automatically. So you basically get HTTPS kind of baked in, which is pretty nice. And what I did was I actually configured this already to point to the IP address because that's how it's going to be able to validate. Underneath the hood, Kamal proxy, the component that handles this, is using caddy as and let's encrypt in order to get the cert. Next is registry. So this is where you actually have to configure the username and the password in order to tell Kamal how to authenticate to the Docker hub and kind of push up to it. And you can use other registries too. And then here you can see secrets here too. Now these are not actually the values. This is like environmental variables that refer to the value, that reference the value. And the values, I have it's under .kamal secrets here, and you can see I have like variables here. So that's how you kind of refer to it. Now, I have variables because what basically I'm doing is I'm just using the environmental variables in the shell. Just to basically keep it simple, but you can use different adapters like 1Password, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna source this env deploy.sh, and I'll show it to you with the environmental variables. I'm gonna delete this file anyway, so there's no point in trying, okay? But it helps to explain what I'm doing here. So what I did was I sourced that in, so if I could just basically grep it, just to confirm it, and then echo that password here so you can see it. And it's all working. That's good. So that is enough to deploy. Before I deploy though, let's actually run this app locally and then explain it a little bit more so you know what we're going to deploy. So what I like to look at is like the routes usually. So routes here, you can see I have like a post index and then there's an up check. So it's basically just resources to post. It's a CRUD. That's all it really is. It's pretty simple. I kept this simple for this. And you can see the post controller right there. So let's actually open this up locally. And you can see I have some posts kind of local right here. Once this loads. Taking a little time here. Let's go ahead and refresh. There it goes. There. So you got all the posting. I seeded it. There's a seeds file that kind of created all these 3 records. That looks good pretty locally, so I'm going to control C that now. So now we're on to Kamal. So Kamal, what you want to do is you want to run Kamal setup. That's like the first command you run. And so what that does is it SSHs into the machine and it ensures Docker is kind of installed. Then it builds the Docker image. And I should point out, it builds the Docker image on this machine. So it does it locally here. And then if it needs to push this, or will push the Docker image, and then it's going to start the Docker container. So let me go back to this right here in the documentation and show you the documentation, the commands, there is Kamal setup. See, it says it sets up accessories, basically bootstraps everything, and then it deploys, and then essentially calls Kamal deploy. So on a brand new server, if you don't have anything installed yet there and you've never used Kamal, then you need to run Kamal setup. But once you've deployed it already, then you don't have to go through the bootstrap stage. You just call Kamal deploy, and it's a little bit faster. Okay, so I call setup, and it built the image, it pushed it, and then what it's doing now is actually trying to start the image on the server here. So what's useful to do is actually go into the server. Let's go to the server here. And then what we can do now is run docker ps. So you can see the container is running, and Kamal will not start the container up unless it's healthy. So you want to get your app working, or else it's just basically going to fail the deployment, and then you're not going to see. And that's a good thing, because you don't want to deploy bad code. Anyway, so you can see docker ps there, docker exec. That's going to be pretty useful to go into this container with bash here. Oh, I should point out that I did configure deploy.yml. I also kind of adjust this very slightly, the Docker file, just so it's the root user. Makes it a little easier to debug, and there's some debugging tools that I installed. So one of the debugging tools is basically PS is available here, just so I can see the processes. So you can see what happens is Kamal has real server up and running, and it's basically listing port 3000. And so I could curl localhost 3000 here, and it's gonna be a bunch of HTML because it's like the post index. So maybe easier one to curl is the upcheck, and this you can see it's just basically saying background color green. The upcheck is healthy. And what I want to point out is I'm gonna go back to PS and you can see there's like a thrust command in front of this. Thrust like preloads the Rose app, it also proxies it. So not only is port 3000 working, but port 80 is also working. I'm going to show you right now. Port 80 is working, and since port 80 is default, you can always just do this. Yeah. So that's basically the app up and running with Kamal. And Kamal, you know, it's pretty nice because it can deploy all this and automate all this for us. And that covers the oh no, I almost forgot one thing. Okay, so the deploy.yml, I want to check this domain too. So let's actually go check that. So that should all work there and there. So that's actually deploy, right? I actually only checked kind of the terminal because I'm like showing you how to debug, but it's useful to actually check the browser too. Okay, let's go ahead and close that off. Now onto Blossom. So Blossom, I'm on a brand new account here with essentially empty state. And with Blossom, I'm not going to even pre-provision the servers because you don't have to. Blossom can actually handle that. So I'm going to go click new cluster for Blossom, and then click choose blueprint. And then there's different blueprints you can use. You can use a minimal server, which is just one server, or a basic server, which is like pretty useful for dev environments and all that, or a highly available cluster, which is kind of what is recommended for production. I'm going to click on minimal server so you can see the process here. And then what happens is it kind of generates a cluster name. I'll just leave it at that. Holy Frog. And then cloud provider, you could use kind of any cloud provider. Pretty much all of them are supported. I'm using Hertzner again. And then you can choose the region. Now the server configuration is minimal server because that's what I clicked on. But you can see there's like one server here where you can install Postgres, Redis, and then you can pick the server size. And then there's the roles kind of associated with that already. Or you can click basic server, and then that now basically separates things out. And these are kind of pre-baked blueprints. You could always only kind of create an empty cluster and kind of more manually configure this if you need to. But blueprints are actually really nice. So there's a web server here, there's a build server and database server. And here, this blueprint is nice because it separates the web server from the database servers. And it's nice to kind of keep state kind of separate. And then lastly, there's a highly available cluster. This has a load balancer. This is a web server, 2 web servers. This is a worker server, has a build server and database servers. You can install Postgres and Redis. So all this, you can just click create cluster, and it's actually now can create all that infrastructure that I just mentioned there. The first thing Blossom does is actually, let's click on this. It creates actually a VPC. On the 3 major cloud providers like AWS, Google, and Azure, VPCs are kind of essentially required. and you can use the default VPC. But on these other cloud providers like Hertzner and like DigitalOcean, it's kind of interesting. They're kind of open by default. So Blossom actually tries to kind of guide you towards like best practices and create a VPC for you. So that way you can use actually private IP addresses and actually lock down the ports. That's actually pretty important. So that's all kind of done right there for us already. And then we can go back to blueprints. And you can see, you can click now view cluster details. And once you click on that, you can see that all the servers are now being created, right? You see the load balancer, the 2 web servers, and the database server, all that. You can also, I'm going to click on Hertzner here, I guess. I'm going to have to click refresh here. But it's basically creating all the servers here on the Hertzner side. So again, all you do is have to select a blueprint and click create. And it created the VPC. Let me actually show you the VPC network too. There's the VPC network. And here's the firewall rule. And here are all the kind of servers again. So that was all. It's provisioning now, and then it's gonna set up basically essentially Docker, because you can use Docker also, and then it's going to basically be ready for deployment. That doesn't take a little bit of time, so I'll basically come right back right after it's done deploying, so you don't have to wait. So the servers are done provisioning now. So you can see it's active, and then it gives you a couple options here. We can create our first app now here, or we can just use a quick start. I'm gonna do that just to get going with this quickly. And I'm gonna use a deploy Rails app here. So I just click configure deploy. So you can see there's the cluster that we just created. It was the first field form. The app name, I'm just call it Ruby-Rails here. And then the Git repository. So I'll take a look at this, but basically it's already here. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit of that. Container registry. So this is just kind of like similar to kind of Kamal over here, right? Where there's like a image. And so here is Tungaroo demo and the container registry Tungaroo. I did pre-configure this, but it's pretty easy to add a new container registry, and you could basically choose whatever registry type you want to use and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with kind of cloud providers and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let me cancel that. Some pre-baked environmental variables just as part of the quick start here, and then a database here. That's our kind of setup. And this is the database that was deployed as part of the cluster. Now I'm going to click create app, and then I'm going to click deploy just to get the deploy started. But that's all you really need. Now we have a new cluster, load balancer, highly available, and then we just deploy a Rails application onto it by just clicking a couple buttons there. I do want to point out a couple things now about this example project. It's got a little bit more prettier kind of HTML, which you'll see once it's fully deployed. But I want to point out very importantly, look, there's no Docker file here. So with Kamal, it requires you a Docker file. With Blossom, a Docker file is optional. Because what Blossom essentially does is, we kind of go in here and we click on deployment here. Or apps deploy, and you can see during the build stage here. And I'm gonna go uncheck watch, because basically logs are live streaming right now. Kind of scroll up here. What Blossom does is it's kind of cloning down the repository, but right here, it's actually detecting the framework. So there's some heuristics here. Basically, based on a source code, it's gonna detect the language and framework and decide what to do. And here it decided to use basically a build pack. So Blossom can deploy your application, and Docker file is completely optional. It's using something called Heroku build packs, which is kind of what Heroku uses. So that's pretty, it's the open source kind of version of that. And that's pretty nice because it's pretty hardened, and you don't need to maintain a Docker file, essentially. It's optional. Now you can use the Docker file if you want to. It's completely up to you. And if you want to go use a Docker file and kind of do all that, let's go click on here. It's be Ruby Rails app that's deploying. It will be under right here under Docker build right here. So Docker build, it's auto detected and it decides which basically build pack to use or which builder to use. So you can use a custom Docker file if you want to. Build pack is kind of what it will detect to use most of the time. You use a static site, pre-built image, Nix packs. Kind of pretty much they're all there. I recommend leaving on auto for most cases, but if you need customizations or if you really need custom Docker files, then you can always do it. So that's kind of deploying. While this is deploying, I'll walk you through this UX so then you just understand how it works. You see some process here on the dashboard. There's no processes yet because it's still deploying the application, but once the web process is up, then you'll see it here. And it's common for applications to have like a web process and a worker process, and you'll see it all there. And here's the cluster it belongs to. Here's the repository that we just looked at, just mainly pointing out there's no Docker file. Maintenance mode on or off, you could kind of see that. Here's the button that we click to start deploy, and here are the deploy logs kind of going through. Git repo. So this is where you can go adjust your Git repo settings. We just configured this as part of the quick start. But if you wanted to, you can have a private repository here. You connect to a Git provider. So you can connect to GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. And then if you connect to any of those, then CI/CD, essentially Git push deploy, is one click away. You just click one button, and then you should be able to go Git push, and it's going to be automatically deployed. Because I want to point out that with Kamal here, you're building a Docker image here on this machine. So because of that, you have to set up something like your own CI/CD pipeline, like GitHub Actions or something. With Blossom, you just click a button, and the webhook is going to actually kick off this API call right here to deploy it. So you don't have to set up GitHub Actions. But you can if you want to, because if you have like a more custom workflow, then you might want to just basically call this deployment endpoint directly yourself. Okay. Let's see, Docker registries is next. So this is where you will configure your Docker registry. Again, similar to Kamal here, is just a UI interface, which is nice. Services. So this is like a service is like a database like Postgres or Redis, and you could basically link services, and basically that would expose an environmental variable like database URL to your environmental variable, so your application has access to it. Next is environment. So environment are all your environmental variables. So you can edit here. You can toggle this advanced mode here to kind of edit that way. And then you could also see your link environmental variables. This is from basically your services right here. It's just kind of linked. If you define another database URL, that will take precedence over this. Activity is just showing all your kind of deploy logs here. So you can see deploy is kind of going a little farther. Basically finished the build. It ran a release hook, which basically ran migrations right here. And let's go back here. And then it deployed, as you can see, now it's deploying across 2 servers because we have 2 web servers. So it's kind of, what Blossom does is, see this log right here? It's kind of like what it does. It's in some ways it's similar to Kamal. It SSHs into a bunch of machines, and then it executes commands in parallel. But because Blossom basically kind of has more control over this, it can show you all the logs at a high level here, and then show you individual logs on these additional logs here. So it just kind of cleans up the logs nicely. So it's deploying all that. It creates a kind of managed domain here. It's doing a proxy here, so it's getting close. App logs, I kind of want to show you that real quick. So app logs is basically like live logs on basically a GUI interface here, which is nice. So it's going to take us a little time for the basically the container to spin up. But once it spins, yeah, you can see it right here, right? Then basically it's going to show you all the logs now across all the servers, across all the containers. And processes is how you kind of go in here, kind of scale. Also, I should point out for Kamal, basically I SSH into it earlier, and you saw, let me exit out here the container and go Docker PS. There's one container, and what Kamal recommends you to do in order to scale is just actually use a multi-threaded server, which pretty much is all available. So you scale with threads, which is fine. But with Blossom, you can scale with threads as well as processes. You just click on the scale button here, and then you add more basically containers. So there's a little more options here. And the way it works is, you see there's one basic container per server, and there's 2 servers because we provisioned 2 web servers in the cluster. So it's just basically, if we were to have 2 servers, this would be 4 containers in total. That's how it scales. It's uniformly scaling everything. It keeps everything kind of nice and simple. Then this is how you kind of restart. You can restart your servers there. Custom domains. This is how you add custom domains. You just add new custom domain here, and then you point the IP address to that custom domain, and then it should work. Health checks. This is how you set up zero downtime deployments. And by default, I decided to leave this off just so you can get your application working, have it stable, then enable this. But I do recommend enabling this. There's more advanced settings here, like resource configs, like basically CPU memory limits and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of optional here. Asset uploading. That's kind of another way to upload your assets to a CloudFront or some CDN. Docker build settings, I kind of covered that a little bit earlier. And then there's this checklist here of kind of everything. Now, settings, you could rename your app here. You could enable or disable maintenance mode right here. A daily restart kind of ability, or like a custom caddy file here. A little more advanced modes here, advanced settings. Then here's kind of servers that we all provision in the blueprint. Let's go back to, I guess, dashboard, and let's go back to this logs. It has completed now. And so now what we can do is, oh, and I should point out, look, it also has a load balancer here. So the nice thing is, since it can create a load balancer, these web servers, if you add a new one, it's automatically added. It's automatically configured. You don't have to go configure a deploy.yml. It knows about it. With Kamal, actually, you're supposed to use, they recommend using managed load balancers, and then you go add the load balancer in front, then you configure it. And you could do that with Blossom too, if you just don't want to run Blossom's kind of built-in load balancer. Then let's click on dashboard. Now you can see, click on view app, and you're going to see now the app up and running. So it's a little bit, like I said, a little fancier kind of HTML page here, but this is a fully working Rails app. You can go see view all jokes here. You can edit jokes. You can delete jokes. It's all connected to the database that we kind of provision and deploy. So you can see there's quite a difference between Kamal and scope of what it does and kind of what Blossom does. Blossom, in some ways, is similar to Kamal. It's just a nice UI interface, and it has a kind of a lot of things that it just handles actually for you and all that. One final thing I kind of want to point out is that, oh, you know what? Let's actually SSH into one of these machines, and then I'll point out one final thing. Let's go to look at servers here, because I want to show you kind of underneath the hood kind of how it works here. On web here, if you click on one of the servers, it gives you some instructions here on kind of how to SSH into the server. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm going to exit out that server, and now I'm going to one of the servers that Blossom created, right? Oh, oops, I didn't add my SSH key. So, because it's kind of brand new, so I'm going to go ahead and go and cat my SSH key. I'm just going to demonstrate this to you right now. And I'm going to add it at the cluster level. You can add it at cluster or the account level. You know, I think I'm actually add it at the account level, so I don't have to do it again for other clusters. And I'm going to add a key here. So I'm going to add my Puppet key here, call it tongue, and then click add SSH key. And what that does is basically says, I check the cluster or server activity for the progress. But basically, we go to clusters here, and then go to one of the servers. And let's just go here, click on the web server here. And you can see SSH key added. It kind of add in sync. So what that did was it basically now have SSH access to the key. Basically my key's on there. See? So that's how easy it is to kind of add SSH keys. So let me actually go back to the server here. So in order to kind of show you a little bit difference with what Blossom approach is for containers versus Kamal. Remember, Kamal just uses Docker, just raw Docker. Blossom actually uses Docker Compose. So if you actually go Docker Compose ls, you can actually see where the Docker Compose file is. And then to kind of help you with this, it shows you the commands you have to run if you want to basically log into the server or the container, I'm sorry, within the server. So you can actually run this command directly, but actually have another command that allows you to actually exec into it like this, like exec, it's just like a wrapper command. So you, the way you use it, you can go doc instead of Docker, and ls, you can see the available apps. You can go doc exec and then the name, and then that basically does the same thing as the Docker Compose command. It just wraps it. So now I'm inside the container that was built and deployed. So in here, I can go curl localhost port 3000, maybe up again, and then echo that. So that you can see it's a green. It's basically healthy. So that's basically the same thing as, let's see, right here, the jokes. So if I go up here, this is going to be a nice green page. That's the same thing right there. But the difference is using Docker Compose. And Docker Compose, I feel like it's pretty nice because it kind of encapsulates everything you need. And I feel like it's simple enough kind of orchestration for it. So I wanted to show you that before I forget. So lastly, let's see, the last thing I was gonna point out, and of course now I kind of forgot, but so you can see Blossom and Kamal have a kind of different scope. You know, Kamal will deploy onto your servers, and it does a good job. I like it. But Blossom will also handle a little bit more and provide you kind of this interface. Oh, now I remember what I was gonna say. The last thing I want to say was Kamal now supports deploying multiple applications onto the same server, which is great. It's a great way to kind of save some money. I do feel like it was kind of added, bolted on. The way you kind of do it. With Blossom, it's actually very easy to add more apps onto the same cluster. You just go click on the cluster and you go apps, and then you basically deploy a new app. You could use another quick start, and like, yeah, I could deploy it right now, Sinatra right now, and I just click create app, and then I'm deploying Sinatra. So now I'm deploying, and I'm not gonna wait for this to finish, but basically, if you click on cluster here, then you can see this, and you can see all your apps. So I now have Rails and Sinatra deployed onto the same cluster. And again, Kamal supports that too, but I do feel like it was a little bit bolted on. And Blossom was pretty much built from the start with that kind of in mind. So there you have it. That covers the Kamal versus Blossom. Hopefully you find that helpful. Thanks for watching.